I'm going to go a little out of order since I know you guys covered the Marianne Stafford thing last night, but I want to get your take because you haven't seen, or at least you haven't covered it to my knowledge, the Briahna Joy Gray versus Bhaskar Sunkara thing. So here is Briahna Joy Gray interviewing Bhaskar Sunkara, president of the nation, who co-wrote an article recently entitled Cornel West Should Run as a Democrat. Here is a few minutes from this conversation.
So the fundamental question I guess I have is, are you concerned about what it means for someone to run in the Democratic Party and validate tacitly or explicitly the party that I think we both understand to be both corporatized and corrupt?
Well, I think Bernie Sanders in practice did change a lot of American politics in his two runs. He established that there was a left opposition to the establishment. He associated us with...
He established that there was a left opposition to the establishment. Wonderful. That's great. It's great to know that 7 years later.
Camped out in Zuccotti Park for 59 days who did that.
Yeah, right, exactly. And that was a few years prior to that campaign. But again, this is Bhaskar Sunkara, president of the nation now, founding editor of Jacobin magazine, just like Kyle, just like Crystal, just like all the democratic socialist progressives, just living in a world where raising consciousness and changing conversations about domestic policy is a win. It is a win if you peddle magazines to intellectual PMC democratic socialist progressives. Like, this guy's a magazine peddler. It's so obvious. And if you think Kyle contradicted what he was saying in his own sentences, wait till you hear this.
Some key issues like Medicare for all, like a expanded minimum wage, like unionization, like a more progressive foreign policy. That Henry Kissinger moment during the debate that I mentioned before.
What's that, Nick?
I want the video to keep playing, but he said a more progressive foreign policy. Like, he's just making up political fan fiction at this point. Like, and that's what they do. But I want the video to keep playing.
Well, that was an area that even those who supported Bernie Sanders always said he really had no articulate vision of. It wasn't a subject he generally got into.
That's why the sort of disciples of his movement have that blind spot, because he had that blind spot.
That's a good point.
Yes,
it's a good point.
That Henry Kissinger moment during the debate that I mentioned before. I mean, that really, I think, was part of this message that we're different than the rest.
That Henry Kissinger moment in the debate, he's referencing the line where Bernie said, "Henry Kissinger is not my friend, and I'm proud of that." What was that? 8 years ago now? What was that? March 20? That's the victory,
his victory
right?
For the workers. His victory for the workers is Bernie Sanders just having a viral moment in a debate. This is unbelievably terrible. But sorry, go ahead, Ken.
No, I mean, here, we'll keep going.
The DNC, I think, was unable to stop him from getting those messages out. Was unable to stop him from.
They were unable to stop him from getting the messages out. They stopped him from winning. They stopped him from implementing anything. What you're saying, because they literally didn't put a ball gag in his mouth and chain him to a radiator in fucking John Boehner's basement that he beat them some way? Like, they were able to kneecap him just fine. They couldn't stop him from getting the message out. What does that mean? They couldn't stop him from talking? Yeah, point. Yeah, you can have that point. He was able to talk and get the message out to people like you, so that 7 years later you can wax nostalgic about his Henry Kissinger line and cite that as some embrace of a progressive foreign policy agenda, which he never really had, and use that to try and sheep herd people into another Democratic primary campaign, because this conversation took place in response to his article, Cornel Should Run as a Democrat.
Getting second in both races. Obviously, Obama's intervention plus the DNC was a decisive factor in 2020. And I think that I'm sympathetic, though, to the Sanders perspective of I'm going to choose who to be in opposition to. That's the first part of his perspective that I am sympathetic.
Again, this is another more fan fiction, right? As if Bernie was empowered to choose who he's in opposition to. In other words, giving Bernie a lot of credit for Biden's victory, acting as if he wielded some influence.
But what did that do? What did that do? Because I remember this. I remember the people saying it's like David Dole is the person that sticks out to me. I would rather be fighting Joe Biden. And that's exactly what they did not do. That's exactly what they did not do, though. That's the thing. They stopped fighting him when he was in office. This is why it's, from my perspective, it's better to have Trump. Just imagine if we had Trump the last 2.5, whatever minute time. With all the liberals, all the David Doles, all the old enemies, would they be on the sideline at brunch, or would they be in the fight? Would they be further left on defund the police? Would they be further left on war? Would they be further left on Ukraine? It's like they don't see themselves going to lunch, going to brunch, as to say, when Joe Biden is in office. Even the two that are here on the screen. Even the two that are here, and we're friendly to Briahna Joy Gray, but even both of them have lightened up, even in their critiques of Joe Biden and the Democratic Party. Even them, if it was Donald Trump, it would be a lot of more feverish pitch. When Donald Trump is in office, and we said this earlier, they feel the need, and I'm talking about the professional managerial class, they feel the need to go further left. It seems, I don't know if it's subconscious that they're doing that, but it comes out as they're being a lot more radical.
Well, because their bluff won't get because their bluff won't get called, because there's no possibility of enacting anything they're talking about. So it doesn't raise any issues. It's very easy to talk about how you're going to jump off the cliff when there's a big net.
Yeah. Right. Well, that
Democrat
point
power,
CJ,
then they got to admit that they can't do any of this through the political system that they're still determined to work through.
Well, that point you made, CJ, about how at the very top of that, where you said, well, the problem is Bernie isn't challenging Biden. That was such a good point. Bhaskar actually makes that himself. This is what I mean. He contradicts his own arguments worse than Kyle. So here, we'll let this go.
So in other words, I would rather be in opposition to a center-right Democratic Party government than a far-right Republican government.
Social Democrats, please learn what the Overton window is, please. And I'll be short, because I want the video keep playing, but please, Social Democrats, learn what the fuck the Overton window is. Why do they keep calling Joe Biden center-right? And I'm gonna start doing what Bree did. I'm gonna start inviting these people on. I invited this guy on who was attacking Cornel West earlier today. I need you to define what center-right is. Center-right is. So Joe Biden is center-right despite the fact that he's funding ICE more than Donald Trump. He funded the military-industrial complex more than Donald Trump. He cut Medicaid and put millions of people out of his insurance. So how are you guys defining the Overton window? Well, let's continue. I don't want to be too.
I can tell you how they're defining it. It's not at all on policy. It's not at all on policy. Yes, that's all it is. It's he tweeted that healthcare is a right. That's it. Right. That means he's center. That means he's center right and not far right. That's it. Not policy wise. We're marching to nuclear war with 2 nuclear powers, and somehow that's center right to him instead of far right. Go ahead.
Exactly.
The problem is Sanders has not always actually been a clear oppositional force.
There you go.
Once that government came into office. So
the problem is Sanders has not always been a clear oppositional force. It should come as no surprise that his magazine, Jacobin, half of their headlines are, Biden should have done this. AOC should have done this. Bernie shouldn't have done this. They ran an article this afternoon with the headline, AOC shouldn't have endorsed Joe Biden, right? And that's a very common headline that they run. Well, we like these people, but they should have done this different, or they shouldn't have done what they did, right? Just like friendly advice to these people who you're trying to string your readers along to believe that, yeah, they're on their side, we're on their side, and they're on our side. Right, exactly right. Shouldn't have, Biden shouldn't have sent cluster bombs to Ukraine. Right? I mean, scathing pushback from Jacobin, right?
Yeah,
and the nation.
Yeah, if you don't mind, Russ, I want to add this before I actually had to leave, because I was, as much as I interrupted that clip, I was biting my tongue the entire time, because the entire premise of his argument was trash and flawed from the beginning, which is a very similar pattern I'm noticing from the PMCs. Their startup premise is wrong. So he mentioned how you should run as a Democrat because Bernie Sanders had influence in the political process. And if I was there live with him, I would push back on him and say, no, he did not. What do I mean by that? Ever since the start of the Bernie Sanders campaign, the Democratic Party has shifted to the right even more. They're funding ICE more than Donald Trump. And I already did a list, but I can go on and on and on, right? To COVID relief funds sent to the police. So your guys' thesis that Bernie Sanders had influence on shifting the party to the left is not true. It's not, and he's like, well, Bernie Sanders did a good job bringing up Medicare for all. We are further away from Medicare for all than we ever been. So ever since the start of the Bernie Project, the party shifted to the right. The needs of the worker became farther apart. So their thesis is that it's good to run as a Democrat because you can influence the party. That is not true. The Democratic Party is not shifted to the left by these people. People like Bernie Sanders and AOC is shifted to the right because of the Democratic Party. A few years ago, would Bernie Sanders endorse someone who kicked millions of people off their health care by privatizing Medicaid?
Right.
He endorsed someone who kicked millions of people off their health care. That would mean to be shifted to the right. AOC said she supported abolish ICE under Donald Trump. Joe Biden led to a border industrial complex boom where ICE agents like, dude, this is unbelievable. They gave an interview. This is unbelievable, all the stuff they're giving me. So AOC went from abolish ICE to I'm going to endorse the guy who funded ICE more than Donald Trump. You see how they get shifted to the right? This alone dismantles his entire argument.
Yeah, no, Bree actually made that point later in the interview. She says, as you absorb into the Democratic Party, right, that resistance softens. You become less oppositional as time goes on, not more. But what Bernie has done for Bhaskar Sunkara and for Jacobin, and to a lesser extent, but to some extent certainly for the nation, is he's created some themes for which they can base their magazine on. I mean, it's not much different from what Kyle did with the Marianne. Use the Marianne campaign to juice YouTube subs. This is use the themes of the Bernie campaign. The push for Medicare for all. The push for unionization. The push for free college. Use those to write and sell articles and magazines and online subs and things like that. This does not mean that those are not noble goals, but what it does suggest is that he is embracing this decades-long, quote-unquote, struggle to achieve these things. It's really a struggle on his part to sell magazines. Right? I mean, that's what it is. And if you convince yourself that this is a long game and we have to work within the system, that's how you maximize readership, because people who read The Nation, yeah, they're progressive, sure. They're to the left of Joe Biden. But at the end of the day, they're Democrats. They're liberals. They're afraid of Donald Trump. They're not going to go there. And he's not going to go there. That came through very clearly in that interview. It came through very clearly in the article that they just put out.
I think it's similar to them asking for Crimea in the negotiations of peace. It's something that is just out of bounds.
Right, out of the question. Right,
exactly. It's out of bounds of reality. So for them, this is about their livelihood. We have to understand this is not about their strategy is guided by their livelihood. So how they're determining what to say to do is guided by how they want to make money or how they want to keep making money in the way that they have. Now, think about this. If the left was to move away from the Democratic Party, what would Jacobin write about?
Exactly.
What is there to write about? Who's their readers? Like, who would be their readers, Jacobin, the ones they've established already? It's not like they've established this, like, far left radical group. They've cultivated a audience that are Democrats, but Democrats who think that the Democratic Party should be better, and then that's it. That's the extent of it. So they can't come and say, hey, guys, Democratic Party is never going to be good. Let's do this. And wait a minute. They can be good. They can do this. We can. Right. Look, we used to be FDR. Let's think about what we can, the positive. They've cultivated this so they can't leave it. And we spoke about this, Nick and I. This is the Bernie Sanders industrial complex. And I guess, how do you say his name? Bhaskar
Sunkara, yeah.
Yeah, Bhaskar Sunkara, you said his name right.
Yeah, no,
yes. This is really about keeping themselves relevant.
Please clap.